My name is Brian. Chapter 9. The title is Isabel 2 Points plus One Big Joke Point. There are two parts to lunchroom detention. First, instead of eating with your friends in the cafeteria, you eat your lunch at a kid-sized table in the corner of the kitchen. Second, when your class goes out to the schoolyard, you stay inside to help the staff clean up for the next lunch period. Miss Friedman says that when we see how hard the kitchen staff works, we'll have more respect for cafeteria rules, like no throwing food. I've never had lunchroom detention before. I've never had any detentions, Isabel tells me as we sit down at the little table with our lunches. I move the blue plastic fork through the orange macaroni and cheese goo. Isabel opens the lunch she brought from home. I watch her take a bite of a delicious-looking ham and cheese sandwich. A big frosted brownie is peeking out of her lunch bag. "How many detentions have you had?" she asks. "Enough," I tell her. She takes another bite of that sandwich. There are bright red tomato slices in it, and lots of mayonnaise. One of the cafeteria workers comes over to give us an extra milk. My, she says to Isabel, "I never thought I'd see a good girl like you eating her lunch back here." "Some boys were making fun of me," she says. "I had to defend myself." She sits up straighter like she's proud of herself and says, "You can't let people push you around." "You threw food?" he says. "I'm sorry," she says. I tell him I'm sorry too. While we're eating, I think about the Jokers Club and Operation JDBR. It doesn't feel like we're much of a club anymore. Not with John making jokes on me and tricking Dan and me into cutting school. And if Isabel, who sits right next to me, is going to go into a screaming, foot-stomping, food-throwing rage every time I scratch my head for the Jokers Club, we'll both be in trouble all year long. So I tell her, the whole scratching thing that the guys do, they're not doing it to make fun of you. I explain about the Jokers Club and how scratching is a sign that a joke is good, that it's not about her. "It may not have started out to be about me," she says, "but it is now. They look right at me when they scratch." "Not me," I tell her. "I would never do that." "And what about my nickname? Is a ape?" "How'd you know about that?" I ask. I'm feeling sorry about making up that mean name of her. "One of you guys wrote it in yellow chalk on my book bag," she says as she takes the brownie out of her lunch bag. "Not me," I tell her. "Dan wouldn't have either." "It was probably John," she says. "Whenever I walk by him, he whispers, 'Is a ape.' Next time he does that, I'm going to do something violent. And those prissy, silly girls, Charlene, Beth, and Mona, I'm not taking any more of their nonsense either. The next time one of them makes fun of the way I dress or says that I'm fat," she makes a fist and throws it up in the air. "Pow, right to the kisser." I'm super shocked. I picture her turning into a troublemaker who dresses only in black leather, has a dozen tattoos, and beats up everyone with brass knuckles. I tell her, "But you've always been the best kid in class. You get the highest grades, and you're a real teacher's pet." She glares at me. "But being a teacher's pet isn't your fault," I continue. "Teachers naturally like you because you're just so smart." She unwraps the brownie and licks the frosting off her fingers. My mouth sort of waters. "You don't understand," she says. "I'm sick of being a good girl. None of you respect me because I'm smart. Well, maybe you'll respect me when I'm tough." She eats the brownie and washes it down with her extra milk. "I'm going to lift weights for strength," she says between bites and slurps. "I think I'll take boxing lessons too." I think maybe Isabel has totally lost her mind. After the kids clear out of the cafeteria, we help two of the kitchen staff clean up while the first 5 grades file in for their lunch period. There are spills and sticky ketchup blobs to mop up, containers to throw in the trash, books left behind to put on the lost and found shelf. It's amazing what slobs some kids are. After school, I'm so busy telling Miss Samuels that I'm grounded for 2 weekends because of cutting school, and that I got lunchroom detention for throwing pizza, that I didn't even notice the portable computer on the desk in front of us. When I ask her whose it is, she flips the screen open and exclaims, "The school system presented this laptop computer to me when I retired. It's better than a watch and a plaque like they gave Mr. Anderson, don't you think?" I agree and then ask, "Am I going to use it?" "Yes, indeed, and we'll get you into the school's computer room, too." The first thing I learned to do on her computer is open my own work desk and make a header. Then she types in some words broken into syllables. I read the words by syllables and tell her which rule each syllable follows. Next, I learned how to bring the syllables together on the computer screen and read them out loud again. Then she tests me on the spelling words she gave me for homework, and I try out some new words. We don't cover as many words as usual, but she says that's because I don't know where the letters are on the keyboard. After we turn off the computer, she says, I have an idea for this lunchroom detention of yours. We're going to put it to good use. I'll arrange for you to work in the computer room. As soon as you've eaten your lunch tomorrow, meet me there and I'll show you how to use this book. She holds up a book that teaches typing. By Friday, you'll be able to type without looking at the keyboard. I don't believe I can learn to type in 4 days, but she says the lessons in the book will teach me in a much better way than the way that they taught me when she went to school. I'll walk her to her car so I can carry the computer. She says I'm a gentleman, but I know that the real reason I'm carrying the computer is because I'm pretending that it's mine. When we get to the car, she takes the computer from me, puts it in the seat of her car, and asks, How's your father doing? You know my dad? I asked back. I certainly do, she says. I was Roy Toomey's second grade teacher. I taught him how to read too. Was he dyslexic? Probably, she says. We didn't have a name for it then, but I was thinking about Roy Toomey just the other day, and I'd say, yeah, he probably is dyslexic. He had a hard time learning to read, just like you. He's not a very good speller, I tell her. Learning differences, like dyslexia, are often inherited, especially from father to son. I tell her about the postcard we got from my grandpa Al and that he's my father's father. We agree he's probably dyslexic too. Then I ask her, did my father have a tutor? No, I was his regular teacher. The way we taught reading in those days, sooner or later everybody seemed to catch on. Maybe not in first grade, but if a child like your father couldn't read when they came through the door of my second grade classroom, I knew I had my work cut out for me. I tried different teaching methods until I hit something that worked with him. I probably did the same thing with your father that I'm doing with you, but not on a computer. No, not on a computer. I watch the way her smile connects up at all the wrinkles in her face, which makes me smile too. Just remember, she says, it's the teacher that counts, not the computer. No computer can replace Miss Samuels. I know she's right, but someday I won't have Miss Samuels. That's when I hope I have a computer just like the one in her front seat of her car. As I'm walking across the schoolyard, I think about how my grandpa is still a terrible speller and what my mother said about the Valentine's Day card my father sent her. I decide that if I ever send a Valentine's Day card to a girl, which I doubt I ever will, I won't write anything but my name. I'm on my bike before I see what's printed in big yellow chalk on the pavement next to the bike rack. Brain and is a ape. I have no trouble reading it or figuring out who wrote it. I take off my jacket and use it to rub the pavement clean. When I get home, I call Dan and tell him there's no way I'm friends with John anymore. As far as I'm concerned, there is no club. And if you value your life, I tell him, don't scratch when John or Richie make a joke, because Isabel is turning mean and dangerous. Our Isa 8, I wouldn't call her that if I were you, is my parting advice to him. The next day, I don't wait for John to ride bikes to school with me. When he comes into the classroom making stupid jokes about a bad smell in the room, I just don't pay any attention to him. Everybody does. For a second, I'm not even sure it is Isabel. Her black hair isn't long and bushy and hanging in her face anymore. It's cut short, very short, and slicked back away from her face. She's not wearing a baggy shirt and sweater like the old Isabel, but black jeans, cowboy boots, and a red t-shirt. Instead of holding her books in a high pile in front of her chest, she has a bright yellow backpack slung over her shoulder. She doesn't look as fat as I thought she was. Her body's just more developed than other girls. Charlene, who sits in front of me, leans over and whispers to Beth, "Is that really Isabel?" And Beth answers, "What a makeover." Mr. Bingham says, "Good morning, Isabel. I like your new haircut." She says thank you and heads up the aisle to her seat. John, like always, is tipped back in his chair and he mumbles, "You're still is a ape," as she passes him. And in an instant, John and his chair are on the floor. A lot of kids laugh, including me. "What happened there, John?" Mr. Bingham asks. "Nothing," John says as he rights himself. Isabel sits down. She's got a defiant, don't mess with me look, but I notice that her hands are shaking when she unzips her backpack to take out her books. I wonder if now that she's tough looking, she'll stop being smart in school, but she asks and answers as many questions as ever. She just looks different. I decide she's used some of her smarts to figure out how to dress and act if you don't want other kids to make fun of you. During our morning classes, Isabel gets 3 notes from other girls. When we sit down together for our lunchroom detention, I ask her, "What were all those notes about?" They all wanted to know the same thing, who cut my hair. I wonder if Isabel was hoping for some of those girls would finally ask for her to be their friend. Who did cut it, I asked. My grandfather. He's a barber. He didn't want me to have it cut off, but he said if anyone was going to cut my hair, he should. I imagine Isabel and her grandpa in the barber shop with all that wavy black hair on the floor. I wonder how her mother and father feel about her haircut and new way of dressing. Then she asked me if I know where she can take boxing lessons. I tell her what I've learned about self-defense and being tough from karate. Not for me, she says. I want to lift weights and box. After we finish eating, I finally get up my courage to tell Isabel that I won't be cleaning the cafeteria with her, that Miss Samuels got permission for me to use lunchroom detention to work in the computer room. I explain that because of my dyslexia, I need to learn how to type. She's glaring at me. You mean I have to clean the cafeteria and you get to use a computer, she says? Yeah, I guess. Not fair. We both threw pizza. If your so-called punishment is learn how to type on a computer, it should be my punishment too. She slaps her hand on the table. I'm coming with you. We leave the cafeteria kitchen by the back way. I tell Isabel it's a shortcut, but it's also the only way to get out of there without everyone in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade seeing me with Isabel as Wonder Woman. Friday, during journal writing, I write the whole time. My letter says, I'm learning how to type. It's fun. I can type without looking at the keys. I spell better too. When I get up to a better spelling level, I can use spell check and correct all my spelling on computer. John and Ricky don't like me too much because I don't horse around in school so much anymore. They're all getting all the Joker points this week for jokes that aren't so funny. Dan is still my friend. After we get in big trouble for missing school, his mother and father came to school. Now Dan is doing all of his work in school. Everyone is answering class was surprised that Dan is smart. I think he's even smarter than Isabel. Dan would never need a tutor. He was not doing well in school because he thought Richie and John and me would not be his friend if he was good in school. Now he knows I like him smart. So do a lot of other kids. I wish I were writing this on the computer. I like to type. I hate to write. I have to go straight home after school to start my first weekend of being grounded and to babysit Tyson while my mother goes grocery shopping. He and I start out in his room because that's where most of his toys are. He hands me a tub of Play-Doh and commands, make animals. And we sit cross-legged on the floor while I make him a yellow cow, a yellow horse, and a yellow duck, all about 3 inches high. I line them up on the floor. Let's play with them, I tell him. You can be the farmer. More, he says, and he waddles across his room, digs out 2 more tubs of Play-Doh from the bottom of his toy box, waddles back and drops them in my lap. More animals. Okay, I tell him, but you have to help. I show him how to roll the Play-Doh into little blue eyes. That keeps him busy while I make a red sheep, a red dog, a red cat, and a red rooster. I help him stick the eyes on it, and then I cut barn doors in an empty shoebox and make a silo out of the cardboard center of a toilet paper roll. Brian, my mother yells up the stairs, get down here and unload the car. I'll tell you a story about the animals before you go to sleep tonight, I tell Tyson. How's that sound? Tyson holds up the cow. Make a car, he demands. I made you all those animals, I say. He squinches up his face and starts crying and squishes up the cow to destroy it. Hey, I yell, quit that. Too late. He stomped on the duck and the cat and is mauling the sheep with his free hand. Cars, make cars, he cries. I hate seeing my animals demolished. Sometimes Tyson gets really mad at me. Brian, did you hear me? My mother shouts. I hear you, I yell back. I hear you. I leave Tyson crying over his Play-Doh corpses and run downstairs. As I'm lifting the first bag of groceries out of the back of the car, my dad's pickup pulls into the driveway. Miracle of miracles, he comes over to help me. Aren't you supposed to be with your tutor now, he asked. Not on Friday, I answered. She said she was your 2nd grade teacher. Her name is Miss Samuels. He piles the second bag in his arms and picks up 2 bags himself. I don't remember her, he says. Who remembers 2nd grade? She says you didn't know how to read when you got to her class, that she taught you how. We head toward the back door with our loads. Well, he says, somebody must have taught me. I think it's pretty amazing that my dad can't remember the one person who taught him how to read, when Miss Samuels, with all hundreds of kids she taught to read, remembers him. We're putting down the bags. Oh, yeah, he says, I remember Miss Samuels. She was real strict. She used to keep me after school. All my friends would go off to play, and I had to stay in and review with these flashcards. But she'd give me a snack first, banana bread and juice. He's actually smiling. She gives me banana bread, too, I tell him. Same thing. She must really love banana bread. I'll tell her that you remember. Sure, he says, why not? Tyson's coming down the stairs crying his head off. "Why's your brother crying?" my dad asked me. His smile turned into a glare. "I thought you were supposed to be taking care of him." By the time dinner's ready, I've turned Tyson's mangled duck into a race car, his sheep into a pickup truck, his horse into a backhoe, the cow into the van, and the cat and the rooster into a dump truck. The shoebox barn turned into a garage. With scissors and tape, I turned the toilet paper roll silo into 3 gas pumps. Saturday, I'm grounded for cutting school, so I do a lot of thinking. Sunday, I'm still grounded, so I do some more thinking. Monday, before I wait on my bike for John to come by, before I can tell him what I've been thinking about all weekend, he says to me, "Brian, man, you didn't put your $2 into the Operation JDBR pot last week. You are Dan. You better cough it up today." He pedals on down the street. I pull up alongside him and say, "Listen, John, after what you did to Dan and me, I figure Operation is over. I want the money back that I put in already." He laughs. "You're kidding, right? You don't split the pot till Christmas, remember?" I try to keep my voice from quivering when I say, "Dan and I are half the club, and we say the operation is over. We want our money back." "Look," John says, "you two agreed to something. You better stick to it or you'll have more trouble than you ever imagined." "For us, it's over," I say, "and you have our money. You keep paying $2 a week," he says, "and at the end we divide it up by points." A car honks to pass, so I have to drop behind John. He yells over his shoulder, "Tell that wimp Dan too." I take my time riding the rest of the way to school. Dan is waiting for me at the bike rack. We walk the longest way possible to our classroom so we have time to talk without bumping into Richie or John. I tell Dan that John says we can't drop out of the operation. "But I gotta quit joking and fooling around so much in school," he says. "I'm getting too much grief from my parents. If we're putting money into the pot without making joker points, it's like giving it away to them. We haven't even been laughing at their stupid jokes, and they say they're making points," I say. "If it keeps going on like this, they'll win most of the money." Dan takes only a second to figure out how much money is involved. "At $32 each, the pot will be worth $128 by Christmas, but you and I will lose all of our investment." "This is a bad situation," I say. We agree that we've got to tell John and Richie that we aren't members of the Jokers Club anymore, and that we want our money back from Operation JDBR. "Easy to say, hard to do," Dan says. "Remember, they're bigger than we are." "And meaner," I remind him. "But we're smarter," he reminds him. And I add, "we're on the side of right." Isabel comes striding down the hallway with her new, no-nonsense, tough attitude. "Hey, Brian," she says as she passes, "how's it going?" "Good," I tell her, even though for me things don't seem to be going good at all. "Hey, Danny," she says, "I can press 35 pounds. How about you?" Yeah, way to go, Isabel," he calls after her. He turns to me and says, "Weights?" I shrug my shoulders and say, "I told you so." "So what are we going to do?" Dan asks as we walk the last stretch of hall to our classroom. "Maybe we should go along with them a little longer while we figure out how we can get out of the club without losing money." "Or getting beaten to a bloody pulp," Dan adds. At lunch, Dan and I fork over $2 to John, and Dan records the Operation JDBR scores for the week. John, 12 points. Richie, 8 points. Brian, 2 points. Dan, 0 points.